Hi, I'm Emily, and we are on week 3 of our salmon tank lesson series. Last week we learned all about the salmon life cycle, and the week before that we learned about why salmon are important. And this week we're going to be all about exploring what a watershed is. So we learned last week the salmon life cycle, and those fish get all the way out to the ocean, and they can make it all the way back to their spawning grounds by smelling their way up the watershed. And maybe you haven't heard the word watershed before, but if we think about what it might mean, we could take the word and we can cut it in half, and we have water, we have shed. And I don't know about you, but when I think of that word, I think of a shed that's full of water. I know that sounds kind of silly, but it's really not that far from what it actually is. So think of a shed that's full of water, but the walls of that shed are peaks and mountains, and then the water that's inside the shed is all going to be from streams and creeks and rivers. So according to NOAA Fisheries, the definition of a watershed is a land area that channels rainfall and snowmelt to creeks, streams, and rivers, and eventually to outflow points such as reservoirs, bays, and the ocean. So think about those really high mountain streams. Those are also called headwaters because they're at the head or the start of our watershed. And those little streams, those cold, clear streams, connect to other really small, cold, clear streams, which eventually connect to bigger streams, which go to connect to rivers. Those rivers connect to bigger rivers, and eventually they all lead out to the ocean. So when I keep saying streams that flow into other streams, there's a name for that as well, and it's called a tributary. So a tributary is just a river or stream that flows into another river or stream. So for an example, the Natchez River is a tributary to the Yakima River, and the Yakima River is a tributary to the Columbia River. So I want you to think of some of your local streams, and maybe you can find a map. And I want you to see what some of your small streams within your city are tributaries to. So for if you're in Ellensburg, you can see what Reeser Creek or what Mercer Creek is a tributary to, and what bigger river or stream it flows into. To make this a little easier to understand, let's look at a diagram of what a watershed looks like. So here we have a diagram of a watershed, and we can see the headwaters at the very top there, and the headwaters are being filled up with precipitation, and precipitation is just rain, snow, sleet, and hail. So the headwaters are in our mountains. Mountains get a lot of precipitation in the winter in the form of rain and snow, hopefully snow. And it holds out there all winter until the springtime comes and we get snow melt because the snow melts and it fills those streams up. And then we can see that those little streams or tributaries are going into bigger streams and all feeding into a really large river. We see the watershed divide is the mountain ridge, and then it goes all the way down to that body of water. And then it also says percolation and groundwater, because water is not only on the surface like we see it, we also have water underground, but that is going to be what we're going to talk about next week, so we won't get too far into that. So if we look at this and kind of applied it to where we are at, I'm in Ellensburg, so if I was looking at this, I would say that maybe one of those smaller rivers is the Cle Elum River, and that Cle Elum River is going to feed into the Yakima River, and that Yakima River feeds into the Columbia River, and that Columbia River is going to feed out to the ocean, which is just like where that body of water is on the display. Now we're going to watch a Google Earth flyover tour that's going to take us on a journey all the way to where the sockeye were spawning in the video that we saw last week, all the way the journey that those fish take to get out into the ocean. So we are going to start at the same exact bridge that we saw the sockeye spawning on last week's video in the Cle Elum River, and we're going to follow the Cle Elum River all the way down until we hit Lake Cle Elum, which Lake Cle Elum is a reservoir that we use for water for irrigation. And now we are passing the city of Cle Elum. We can still see the river. It kind of borders I-90, and we're going to make our way down to Thorpe. So now it has fed into the Yakima River, and now we see Ellensburg, and that river is flowing down until we get towards Yakima and Sunnyside, and that is where it feeds into the Columbia River. The Columbia River is the border between Oregon and Washington, and so we're going to follow that all the way out. You might be able to recognize some of those cities there until we get out to the ocean, and those salmon are going to eat as much as they can, and then they're going to take that same journey and path back up the watershed to get to their spawning grounds. So we talked a lot about watersheds today and why they're important, but you still might be curious about why they should be so important to us. So the water that's in our watershed is the water we use every day. It's the water that grows our food, that we play with, that we drink, that keeps us alive and keeps our salmon alive, and every species needs water that's in our watershed. So it's really important that we keep the water clean, clear, and healthy because, like I said, we're all so completely dependent on our water. So now it is time for our weekly activity. This week we are going to be building a paper model of a watershed. So the materials that you'll need are a piece of paper. It could be a piece of scrap paper that's already been used. And you're also going to need washable markers and a spray bottle with water. And if you don't have a spray bottle, you can easily just use a glass of water as well. Okay, so I have my piece of paper, I have washable markers, and I have a squirt bottle with rain. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your paper and you're going to crumple it up into a ball. And then you're going to flatten it out, but not totally flat. So you're going to want it to look something like this. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take 2 colors of washable marker. I'm going to use green and red. And I'm going to take the green marker and I'm going to color it on top of all of the ridge lines, so where the paper is sticking up. Once you have all your ridge line colors, you're going to take the other colored marker and you're going to fill in the low spots on the map. So all of the spots that are kind of indented on the sheet. Once you have all the ridges outlined and the low spots outlined, you're going to take your spray bottle and you're going to simulate rain. So you're going to spray water on it like it's precipitation in a mountaintop. And if you don't have a spray bottle, it's totally fine if you just get a glass of water and get your fingers wet and splash your fingers on it. And so then you're going to spray it, and I'm not going to do it all the way because I want you guys to, but you're going to see some of the colors running. And I want you to pay attention to where the water is all kind of gravitating towards and where it's filling up, and where the color on the ridge lines is bleeding towards, and you can kind of see separate little watersheds in the model that you just made. Thank you guys so much for following another week of our lessons, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week.